Okay, Dave Carja, Tá muidir reached Tá mé le Carja nua anocht Tá Shane agus Katrina lum. Evening, folks. Again, it's been a while, but we're back for another update. We're a bit early tonight, but we're going to kick off because we have new guests. We have Shane and Katrina from County Westmeath. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah,
and that's right.
Yes, Tasha Sinn Fear. We're going to chat tonight about. We've pitched this as a bit of an update on the Ukraine situation. Gia Dave, Brian Bruce on tonight. Gia Ditch, Brian, Avrian. Ukraine, and as I would call it, the self-caused, government-caused crisis that they're causing for themselves about supply and demand of housing, and the fact that it's all been recorded that even the government themselves are acknowledging that we're in a crisis situation. We'll talk about that, and the fact that nobody seems to talk about it on an alternative agenda around Ukraine, although there have been a few people have mentioned things, namely Sabina, Michael D. Higgins' wife, and people like Jeremy Corbyn in Britain have said, why aren't we talking peace and ceasefire? How awful would that be? Anyway, look, Shane and Katrina, you're very welcome. Tafalcha Ulwar Ruv. And just a wee quick brief intro just for yourselves about what's woken you up. I know, Katrina, you've mentioned about globalism and sometimes the negative effects it's having on women. Do you want to just kick us off about how you got interested in this kind of thing?
Yeah, so I kind of got interested in politics there kind of the beginning of this year. And as you mentioned, I feel like Ireland is not on the number one agenda with our government. They're more interested in what Europe thinks and the whole world. So I feel a lot of the politicians, not all of them now, are just more concerned about their career afterwards and perhaps getting jobs in the EU, and they're not really worried about Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I saw a thing there, I think it was that satirical soldier guy mentioned that out of the 160 TDs, 130 of them subscribe to the extreme woke agenda. So yeah, you're right, they're serving two masters. They're serving their paymasters in Europe and not the Irish people. Shane, what are you? Are you pretty much on board with that?
I got involved about a year before. I suppose halfway through the whole COVID mess, I suppose, and I joined the local party because I was, familiar enough with one of the local councillors there. And about 6 weeks into that, I realised this was there was promoting wokeism. I won't mention the name of the party now because I'm kind of embarrassed to have been associated with them, but that's what it was. So I quickly exited stage right from that scenario. I was even signed up to be part of their social media committee, and I saw the rubbish they were lining up, and they weren't listening to me, so I left. I subsequently joined the Irish Freedom Party, which is much more aligned to what I believe in. The handling of the COVID situation was absolute dire, and you can see it now again in another government-made crisis, which is the refugee situation. Yeah. I believe us, the people of Ireland, were very charitable. We've helped people in other countries before, and given our own, ability to work and help people, we will be able to cater for a certain amount of refugees and house them correctly and make sure they're looked after. The women and children coming from war-torn countries, is very important to look after them. But the situation is now at the moment is that thousands of these refugees are going to be in drafty, cold tents littered around the country come wintertime because the government have completely messed it up.
Yeah, and it's not fair on them either. It's not fair on the refugees. They're promising something. One thing that you learn from work is never over-promise. And they're just spineless, the government. They just will not say, look, we have a point we can't go any further to. They're just so cowardly, and they won't do that. Now they're begging. They're begging the GA. They're begging us. They're begging normal people to bail them out of the hole they've created.
They're writing checks that they can cash. That's basically what it is. It's like
exactly.
The big man there, he wants to go out and he invites all his friends back to the house, and turns out that there's some beds for everyone. Lads are sleeping in the shed tonight. That's what they're at. They're trying to look good in front of the guys in Europe. Roger O'Gorman and the likes of that, making promises, trying to make himself look good for his own career agenda, and that's essentially what it is.
Yeah, or it's like the drunk man down in the pub buying drinks for strangers and not looking after his own family, going home and letting his children go to bed hungry.
That's
yeah. I mean, Katrina, you made a point, or a point was made somewhere along the line. about globalism, etc., and about how it has a particularly negative effect on females in society. And yet the opposite would seem, the lie is peddled that liberal feminism, etc., is good for women. But would you go along with the fact that it has a particularly disproportionate negative effect on women when you see some of the things that have happened recently?
Well, yeah, like especially like in Westmeath, there was like just recently, a load of men were brought down, and nothing was discussed with the community of Kinnegad, and they were just brought there. And they were up in Dublin, and I think they were actually fighting, allegedly with Ukrainians, and they were just shipped off to Kinnegad, and the people got very worried down there. You know, and a load of men just brought in, I think it was about 75 of them, and with nothing to do, and they're just dumped there, you know, so into a small little town. Yeah, it makes people scared. There's obviously
It's the lack of consultation.
yeah, and they bring them in at night. They've done that in another hotel in Port Harlington as well, last May. You know, they don't talk to the community. As Shane said, like the Irish people they're very charitable. But it's that lack of communication. They're treating us like children and not consulting us at all. You know, so
yeah, I think it's the International Protection Accommodation Services. I was just looking up their website on gov.ie and their reports, and what it comes across to me is that they're under-resourced and incompetent. You know, they're supposed to publish an annual report every year. The last annual report was 2016. They're supposed to publish monthly statistics on, you know, who's in the country and where are they. That last report there was January of this year. So, I mean, that would show that they're under-resourced, incompetent, and unable to properly integrate people, and you know, even let local county councillors, I think it was the local Labour councillor there for the area in Kinnegad, had said in the initial interview that they knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
You know, and what would it take? You know, just a letter or some consultation in advance of that to say how would this be received, and then that leads, of course, then to cultural issues. I won't say race or anything like that, because it's not a racism issue; it's a cultural issue, cultural differences. You know, cultural attitudes towards women, especially from Middle Eastern, North African countries. They come here, they might expect something different. I think the age of marrying in some of these countries can be as young as 13, perhaps, you know, maybe younger. So when they see a 15-year-old girl there, they might think she's fair game for approaching in that kind of manner, which is not acceptable here. So I'd like to know what kind of educational program is there for migrants coming into the country, if it exists at all.
Good, yeah. That's a good point. I mean, but I find when you raise good points like that, people, it's just that they have a default to thinking that anybody that mentions anything like that, it's all about race and racialism. And you could argue, it's absolute rubbish. You can argue the Ukraine thing. It's just simply a matter of what we have and what we haven't got. We can't give what people haven't got, and Ukrainians are all white racially, so it's not about race at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, but they are more culturally able to be integrated tonight. To be fair, we'll make that point.
That's it, and we have a history here of being able to integrate people from Eastern Europe, and of course everyone has Polish and Latvian and Lithuanian friends and relations even at this point, because that's what happens. That's the normal way for a nation to build, is to integrate from other nations. Is not to be bombarded with people from a different culture who can only have, maybe through no fault of their own, a negative and harmful effect on the local population and the local culture, which is completely wrong. You know, you take for example that I guess Katrina brought it up, or she mentioned there about Kinnegad. You know, the consultation there might have been better. Was there an education program for people coming into the area? I'm aware that the individuals that were removed from that premises now have been relocated to Selbridge, to a facility that backs onto a girls' school. So has anything been done? Has the can just been kicked? Is that just the usual approach been followed again? Kick the can down the road and someone else's problem, or someone else might make as much noise in that area?
It just seems to be they're just moving it on to somewhere else that they're not. Yeah, it is ridiculous. I mean, people are slowly but surely knowing that they're just incompetent. What's the answer? To wait for the next election? I mean, you know.
Well, we're going to suffer. In the meantime, we're going to suffer an awful lot of pain because of this. We're going to hear of
2.5 years away,
tax on women. We're going to hear of increased instances of cultural clashes, which will be labelled as racism. I've heard one gentleman on the radio saying that Irish people were racist, because they weren't being accepted into an area. People are maybe afraid of what's coming next. And as you mentioned, if they raise their concerns, then they're just labelled as racist. They're shut down by groups of people who are, funded by sinister groups back.
Just no debate. No debate. I mean, somebody mentioned there about Antifa. We're going to be under serious oppression because of the woke nature of politics now. Antifa should be relabeled anti-Irish fascism because they use exactly the same tactics that was used in Nazi Germany, and they're under the labels of being the nice guys, if you like.
That's it. That's how they con you, They'll set up this propaganda group who will spread a particular agenda. A lie, exactly. And they'll get what they want that way.
It reminds me about, I mean, the local people themselves, you said we're 2.5 years away from an election. Okay, we've got council ones in 2 years. But the local people in the meantime are going to suffer. Similarly with the environment agenda, if you want to talk about, let's not get into the debate about that, but man-made environmental temperature rising or whatever, they're hammering the local people by putting extra taxes on them instead of saying, well, look, if it's man-made environmental, maybe decrease the amount of men or people coming into the country might have it, because everybody has their carbon footprint. But no, they don't do that. They'll think about ways of tackling and hammering local people by letting older, elderly people suffer and not heat their homes at night.
Exactly, and there probably would be more positive impact if we were to just tax goods coming in from China, or encourage people to buy local or buy locally made products. If you think about the amount of coal factories that are planned for China, I know we're getting off topic now a little bit into carbon emissions, but they're hurting people for no reason when they could actually make some clever decisions. Cheap Chinese products, put a tax on them instead of putting tax on fuel. There's an idea, encouraging people to buy local, so then you're not, this carbon footprint of huge vehicles or trucks or whatever it is carrying these things to the country, or boats or planes, whatever else it is.
There are loads of things that they could do if they thought a bit more creatively about it, but they're just not doing it. But just, what do you reckon, Katrina? Do you think that their approach? What do you think is going to be the outcome of all this? Is just going to be some people say it's a runaway train coming down the tracks? It's going to just cause serious social incohesion.
Well, I think we've an awful winter coming ahead. There's going to be food shortages. They were trying to ban turf. I think that's only to the end of the year. And then I think that kicks in January. So do they want people at home in the countryside, rural locations, freezing? It's going to be a really bad winter. There's and everything's just it's not even the cost of living, it's the cost of COVID. They shut everything down for 2 years, and expecting everything just to bounce back as well. So that's all compounded, along with bringing in way too many people that we can't even look after, because we can't even look after our own, so.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's a shortened version follow-up census where the census takers are going to come around again and see how many spare bedrooms you have in your house. And
I'm surprised that's not even happening already. I would say they're going to be looking at that.
The government are getting desperate. If you look at I can't remember which article it is, but the amendment to the bill, where they can, if it's in the interest of not the citizens of the country, the residents of the country, whoever's here, yeah.
That's the 39 amendment. The 39 amendments. That's the housing bill.
That's scary stuff. If you think that they can push that through, and then they can do what they like with private property, they're going to get desperate, and we're going to start seeing moves made on that. So, if we, the people, don't stand up and do something about that, we're in serious trouble.
Yeah, I'm surprised they're not even doing things like that already. But yeah, they'll just tweak it to the residents of the country. But it's anti-constitutional. They're supposed to look after the citizens of the country. They're taxpayers. We're not responsible to people from other countries. We're responsible to people from this country or from Ireland. But I mean, going on back to just the Ukraine thing and the mismanagement of it. The war itself, there's no other agenda at all. Sabina Higgins got completely criticised and shut down for her intervention. I mean, most conflicts in the world, mean, I don't want to talk about the Second World War, but most conflicts in the world are resolved by some form of peace process.
Yeah.
It just seems to be the agenda seems to be to want to continue this as long as it can.
There's a rhetoric there, and you'll see some politicians will repeat the same phrase they've been told to repeat. Europe is at war. I've heard that phrase mentioned a few times now, and when you hear it like that, it even went against the UN guidance at the time to not to refer to it as a war. But there's definitely an agenda there, that there's I suppose, an impetus to get Ukraine part of the EU, and the people who are carrying this message are looking at their next job. They're not looking at necessarily the next election. They're looking at their jobs in with whatever EU appointments they can get, the likes of our current ministers, Roderick Gorman and Coveney and Leo himself. What are they looking at next in their career? They're not interested in us as a people. They're interested in making themselves look very good for those appointments in their next step in their own career. And I'd have a serious problem with people who set themselves up as career politicians, or for example, if you had a Taoiseach who spent 1 year in a job and then went straight into politics, how is that man qualified to run the country? He's a career politician. He's just looking at his next election or his next job. He's not interested in people anymore.
I mean, Jeremy Corbyn raised a good point. He says if the UN can't negotiate some sort of ceasefire, let's get somebody in that can. And you never hear talk about peace or ceasefire, God forbid. It's remarkably absent from the debate.
And we would have been excellently positioned. Ireland has a great history, and I'm probably quoting from the movie there with what's his name, the Siege of Yeovil. Ireland as a sovereign nation has never invaded another country. So we were very well positioned to discuss peace, and we have.
So why are we picking up the tab for a war that's going on 2,000 miles away?
Well, I'm surprised.
That's got nothing to do with us, even geographically. We should,
Yeah, so I'm surprised to see how quickly the Ukrainian flags went up. I know there's no good in invading another country, but we took sides very quick, and therefore, we're no longer neutral. We're no longer.
It's the taking of exactly. It's the taking of sides. I mean, Christy Moore's going to have to rewrite the song Lisdoonvarna because there's now a majority of Ukrainians in Lisdoonvarna and other towns. Donegal towns are like that.
That's it.
It's just unsustainable. I mean, yeah, we took sides very, very quick. I condemn outright what Putin did, of course, but there has to be a different way of moving the debate along.
Exactly. I think Turkey and United Arab Emirates have sent delegations to talk peace. They're the countries who are. You mightn't always have associated them straight away with good humanitarian records and peace negotiations. Where if you put an Irish party there, an Irish party with a good reputation, you couldn't send the current lot. But if you could re-establish your reputation, send our ambassadors or our negotiators to events like this that these guys attended, it would have an awful lot more weight, I believe. Anyway, I'm very proud to be Irish, and maybe I'm biased, but I think we'd be in a very good position.
What do you think, Katrina? Is the message not getting out there? What are we doing wrong about this? What would be a better approach to? Should we just say, look, we can't continue on with the numbers that are coming in. We have to take a different approach.
Well, as Shane said, no one seems to be talking about peace. They seem to keep wanting this conflict continuing on. So it's I think a lot of people are making money manufacturing weapons being sent over. They want us to lose our neutrality. They want us to join NATO. There's all these other little groups we're part of now or joining more. I just don't like the idea of it. There's no end in sight. I'd nearly go down to Cork and get the fishermen that talk to the Russians, before the conflict started, and they didn't want to get in the way of they were doing exercises out there in the sea, and they didn't want to get in the way of their trawlers. Like, if a bunch of fishermen can go up and talk to the Russian ambassador and sort stuff out, they just don't want any communication, and they don't want it to stop.
That's it. We had one of our senior members of the military as well went to speak to the Russian ambassador at the time, and he was criticised by the government for doing that, for trying to talk about peace, trying to sort it out, which is the right thing to do, but he was told, no, you can't do that, that's absolutely disgraceful. What happens next for the people in Ireland? Well, I say, like, keep an eye out your window, because that, as I said, that census guy is going to come around seeing what space there is. The government is getting desperate. They're going to be looking for additional resources and space.
Well, the only thing is they had the census there recently. Was there much talk about that type of question on it? Because that'll be for another 10 years.
It did. It was asking you how many rooms are in your house was on the census. Now, some people who would have been more aware or awake to that sort of thing, they may have been very correct in the number of bedrooms they have spare in their house. Some people would have been a bit more honest about it, telling how many rooms we have in the house free. So it's hard to know what they're going to do with that information. But I know there's going to be a serious problem if they try to reintroduce the COVID injection centres and vaccine centres and testing centres. But those centres is what they need now for the Ukrainian refugees, the community halls around the country, the sports centres. They're going to trip themselves up with their own, uselessness and poor organisation skills.
So, I mean, it's just a matter of, we just don't have a voice at the minute, but, once we get into representation, they have to listen to you then, hopefully we'll get people like yourselves.
Well, but it was awful in the census asking how many spare rooms there were. I've heard some people say, what is it to you? I wrote down that I'm sure only one person will get to read it. But at least I said I felt like I was living in a novel of 1984 by George Orwell. I said, please read it. And I'm sure that won't go up, but at least one person in the statistics office would have seen that, because there just seems to be so much control and the whole, this double speech and, saying one thing and, meaning something else.
I saw a very good, there was a protest recently by the Sovereign People Ireland outside Twitter, and Twitter is the Ministry of Truth, which it is. Unfortunately, a lot of people have moved on to Twitter to get their news and get their information, and what a perfect way to control the message. Control that media source. People will be shut down if they say anything that goes against the woke agenda. Very powerful on Facebook. I recently reported a number of clear violations of community standards on Facebook, posted by people who were just bullies, and because they were following a certain agenda, it stood. Or the message I got back was, we don't have time to review this. If you would like to report it further, please click this button. They'll send you in loops. As a test, I found another message on the other site which was clear in violation again. Another message I didn't agree with, that was removed within the day. So you can see it's unreal what's happening.
Hello, do you think this new Twitter guy is not going to open things up a bit more?
I think he'll follow the money. I don't believe these guys who get this high up have anything else on their agenda except the bottom line. If they answer to shareholders, or if they're just don't trust them, trust wouldn't be there. I was saying to Katrina at one stage, what would it take to just plug out Twitter, plug out Facebook? Could you plug it out? What would happen? Can you imagine can you remember what things were like before that? People had to actually pick up. Well, the newspapers, have a lot to answer for too, but you have to get your news from talking to people. If you have a conversation with someone on the street, it's much different. And it's a different vibe out there from people who talk to each other compared to people who only use social media and exist only in their own echo chambers. It's much different. So it's really, really harmful.
Although, to be fair, a lot of people that don't follow Twitter don't get any alternative from the mainstream,
That's true,
UTV,
yeah.
BBC or RTE. It's just the sort of the greenwash or the brainwash, whatever it is.
My advice to people would be to talk to people. We've lost that. We've lost. I know we're online now, and it's convenient and we can get it out there. But trying to organise meetups, talk to people, to go down to the pub and talk to people. We've lost a lot of that because we were locked down for a long time. People are working from home now. It's like we're being driven away from each other and onto the internet, which can be controlled and monitored, tracked. To see where you are.
That's why things like this are important.
I was at a funeral recently, and when I went to open my phone and look at my feed, I was getting advertisements for funeral wreaths and funeral cards, because obviously the microphone was on my smartphone. They could hear.
Oh yeah, they monitor. They know what they market it based on your likes or based on what you are maybe doing. Yeah, it's quite it is quite.
It's scary like that.
Uncanny. It's uncanny.
I know that the smartphone can be very good if you're trying to find someone or trying to find your location, but you have to be aware that you do need to get out there and talk to people. Don't just rely on what's been told to you. Look for alternate sources of media, especially when it comes to stories about, refugees or Ukrainians and who's in your local area and things like that. Maybe go talk to some Ukrainians, see how they're feeling. We were down in Carrow on holiday recently in the Gaeltacht, trying to course Nas and Mercuich Gaelge. And there was a local hotel which had been done up recently but couldn't open because
of far.
And there was a Ukrainian family there, and they were women and children, and it was nice to be able to see them, housed in a nice place. And there's not a whole lot for them there, and we found that there was a lot of the local population there were talking, saying hello in Irish to us and things like that. And we were wondering how would the Ukrainians adapt? Would they learn the language? Would they learn Irish before they started learning English? How would that work? And maybe that would be a good thing. But it was nice to see that, and if you could talk to them and see how they're doing, that's a good thing. But when they're dropped en masse into a small population centre, it only causes conflict, and then you get accused of racism, and that's not a good thing. So that's my.
But I do notice though when I show people something on Twitter that I've seen that you'd never get on mainstream media, people that maybe aren't as followers of us type of thing, whatever, they do kind of go, oh God, I didn't know that. They do see things, and it wouldn't take much for people to sort of go that or think that the narrative isn't always what it's been said.
Yeah, exactly.
So telling people is important. I mean, share this widely as well, folks, on your social medias and stuff, and your Twitters and all. This broadcast. I know it's a very warm evening. I know people are probably out instead of watching the video, but that's why our viewers are probably quite low tonight. But just share this, guys, as well. Another point just before, well, not to say it too long, because obviously because it's a lovely night and stuff. The thing with Donald Trump's getting awful persecution in America. When you go over there, you see the amount of vitriol against him. The FBI raided his house. Were you following that story?
I saw that all right. And I saw it was unusual that they'll raid his house, but they won't raid Hunter Biden or lose his laptop. So you can definitely see there's a persecution agenda against him because of his message, because of who he is.
But Trump knows.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very sinister. And if you're a logical person, you can put two and two together. You can see, even with the way it's been covered in mainstream media, you can see who the bad guys are. You can see that there's an agenda there to push certain information to cover up things. I mean, the fact that they put in a president who's completely incompetent and can't even hold a conversation just shows that they're up to something. They don't want someone in charge going to ask questions. I liked when Donald Trump, he got a lot of cheeseburgers or whatever it is for that sports team, came over and brought them in and said, here you go, here's some fast food. He could do a bit more about what he wanted to do. He was a stronger president, but they couldn't have that for too long because he started asking the wrong questions. They weren't happy with that.
No, but I think, if he keeps his health, he's hinting strongly that he's going to stand. I think he's still he's young enough to do it. I think if they watch the fraud, he's got to get in, I think. What do you think, Katrina?
Well, the midterms will be coming up, so that would be, how can you watch Biden? I can't anymore. It's actually embarrassing. His cognitive ability is really bad. And he loses the train of thought. I don't know what he had to do tests to see that he was okay. I don't know, it's like those little toys for kids, to put in the triangle or the square or something. I used to laugh initially, but I can't actually watch him anymore. It's just too embarrassing.
I think Trump was set up for failure there because they didn't advise him very well during the whole COVID thing, and they knew what they were doing. The information they were giving him, making him look bad and saying things that weren't necessarily scientifically true. I have a strong feeling that the crisis in Ukraine wouldn't be there right now if people had listened to Trump. He came over and he criticised the EU for buying so much gas and oil off Russia, basically enabling them strengthening.
I don't think the war would be happening if Trump was in.
I don't think so.
We're all told nice guy Joe Biden's going, the whole world's going to improve. Look at it now. Prices skyrocketing. World war.
I need strong leaders.
Yeah, but Trump would have went over and talked to him and go, hey, what the story is, and have some communication. You know, what we can do, or, you know, so NATO and the West just have this agenda. They just want to keep manufacturing weapons. There's just so much money in it.
There's too many people profiteering out of this. It's too beneficial to certain people. They've no intention of this. I think they're quite happy that this has happened. No, I firmly believe if Trump was in charge, it's not happening on his watch. It's happening on Biden's watch, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he's getting a very fair win from the media. The media never show you a watered down version of his
that's cognitive things.
Cognitive ability. I mean, I feel sorry for him. He shouldn't be. He's too old for it.
No, I think there was an interview recently where he was shaking hands with someone and he forgot that he'd already shaken hands with the man, and 5 seconds later he had his hand out again. That's terrible. You know,
he's not with it at all.
You know, he just shouldn't be there. So I had a thought there that time. I forget what it was. I was saying, strong leaders. I just want to make the point about we have, what was it, Michael Collins' commemoration coming up on the 21st of August, and we were thinking about the people going down there to commemorate him, the leaders we have at the moment. If Michael Collins and the leaders we had during the Irish Civil War and War of Independence could see what our leaders are doing now, they'd spin in their graves so fast that if you connected them up to electricity generator, it would solve our energy crisis.
They spin round so much, yeah.
You know what? It's absolutely awful.
I mean, that's what I said myself tonight. The Collins centenary, he would just turn in his grave if he saw the Ireland that we have now. You know?
No,
compare and contrast. Michael Collins, Leo Varadkar, Michael Collins, Micheál Martin, just no comparison.
No. Such great leaders that they had to actually share power. They couldn't do it on their own. That just says enough, you know. So people need to register to vote, make sure they're registered if they're not sure. Get out there and vote and change it from at local level, at national level. Don't wait for the next, national election. Vote for local people who are actually interested in your interests at the next local election. That's it.
Akarja, Gramila Mayagavas chat. I'll not keep this any much longer, really. Thanks for coming in. It's great to get new people and get a new take on things. We'll do this again, yeah?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Carl.
No problem, Katrina, Shane. Great to see you, and keep up the great work, and we'll chat to you soon.
Okay.
Don't forget, like and subscribe. Slán live. Okay, and thanks for all our viewers for calling in tonight. See you again soon. All right. Slán go fóill.